gosh. I'm trying to tell you what happened this week. Facebook. Everyone got 2 Facebook things from me, the truth about marriage and the truth about marriage again. So if you did, I apologize. That was me not understanding Facebook, okay? My daughter always does it for me. I got really brilliant on Saturday, and I said, I'm going to try to figure this out myself. So I put the picture in. I was so proud of myself. It was like, yay, I'm going to grow up here. Hit the post button, and it wouldn't work. And so then I tried to get out of the whole system, and it said, you're not going to post it if you leave. And I'm like, okay, whatever. Got out, came back, hit the post thing, same thing. So I'm like, well, that didn't work. So I said, well, I'll just let Gabby do it. Well, then I went on Facebook, and there it was twice. So I'm very sorry about that. I'm not trying to inundate you with millions of things from Facebook. But anyway, we are doing the marriage class. If you want to come, you're welcome to. Okay, what else do I have to tell you? I am not a yeller, like for my kids. Like, I don't scream and yell at them. I used to when they were like 4 and 5, because I think that's the only way you get their attention. But I don't really, that's just, I realize that as they get older, like I can just talk to them. Well, Dusty got in the car the other day on the way to the rec center, and he says, Mom, I got a D on my test today. Okay. Now, normally I'd be like, whatever, but we just took all of his video games away from him and said, you're not playing videos during the week, you're going to study. And he gets a D. Okay, I went ballistic. I'm screaming at him. I'm yelling at him. It was like the saddest thing in the whole world. And I'm like, what are you thinking? You're never going to get into college. And I put the guilt trip on, and the poor kid was just a mess by the time I got done with him. And I actually pulled up to the rec center and looked around and thought, I hope no one here knows me, because they're going to see me screaming at my son. So anyway, walked around the track, felt really bad, got back to him and said, Dusty, I'm really sorry. I can have a conversation with you. I don't need to scream at you and yell at you, but you need to listen to us. And, we had that conversation. He looked at me and he goes, Mom, you're really scary when you get mad. And I thought that was so funny. I thought, me scary? Yes, I still got it in me, so that's good. Oh. So this is Dusty. The other funny thing that happened this week was we came out to find our 2 kids fighting over earrings. Okay, which wouldn't be a problem if they were both girls. But since one's a boy and one's a girl, this is a problem. Dusty's like, those are my earrings you're wearing. He's like, no, they're not. They're mine. So they're arguing over this. And Rob and I are looking at each other like, you have got to be kidding. Like, we expect them to fight over toys and food, but not earrings. Okay, so anyway, got through that week. So yay, spring break. Won't be here next week. That's a good deal. So we'll be back after that. Saeed, let's talk about Mr. Pastor Saeed, who's still in prison in Iran. You're getting a lot of stuff from me. I'm hoping that you sign the petition. It's kind of really, really important. I just listened. Someone had sent me a link to his wife, an interview with his wife after this happened. And it was so cool because she said when he got taken and put into this prison, God put it upon her heart to read this book from a Chinese pastor who had been imprisoned. And in there, he talked about that his captivity it's not just random. Like, God has a purpose behind it. And she said, what we need to do is pray for God's will to be done, not constantly get him out, get him out, get him out. More like get him out, God, on your timing, because there's a whole big group of people in there that need Jesus, and he may be the only one through his witness. And granted, there's the torture and there's a bunch of stuff. I was listening to what goes on in that prison. I had to turn it down. I could not continue to listen to what goes on. It just made me sick. So he's dealing with a lot, but he actually wrote his wife a letter and said, it's like an egg. He said, if you take the egg and take it out of the incubation period, then the little chick will never come out and it will die. And he said, I want my time in here to be fulfilled to where when the egg is broken and the chick comes out and it's all alive, it's done some good. And so he said, and she was explaining how when we write letters to him, that when it gets to the prison, by their law, they have to translate those letters. He said so many people are sharing the gospel through those letters. The prison guards are reading them, and then they won't give the letters to him, but they will walk by and say little things like, I got 50 letters today, enough to just give him enough encouragement. So it's kind of a really cool deal. So we need to really pray that God will get him out in God's perfect timing, and that through that process that a lot of people will come to know him through that. So I thought that was kind of really a cool deal. So, all right, let's continue on. If you're new, we are going through the Gospel of Luke. We are in Luke chapter 5. Wow, that's pretty good. And we have a long way to go, so we'll be doing this for quite a few years, I'm going to assume. So we left last week with Jesus preaching on the shore at the Sea of Galilee in Capernaum. The crowds are pushing to hear him, and now he has nowhere to go except into the water. So he hops in Peter's fishing boat, and he gets in there, so he's going to start preaching. Now, the cool thing about Jesus is that he knows Peter well enough to know that Peter fishes, and that's how God is going to reach Peter through what Peter knows best in his life. So Jesus is preaching, and you can imagine the scene with Peter. He just got done fishing, and he hasn't caught anything, and it's been all night, and he's frustrated, and he's exhausted, and so you can almost see him sitting at the side doing his nets, just kind of like, I'm just really tired. And then Jesus stops his preaching because he wants to teach Peter something really, really important that you and I, we're going to go a whole bunch of different ways with these verses today. Chapter 5, verse 4, this is what he says. When Jesus had stopped speaking, he said to Simon Peter, "Put out into the deep water and lower your nets for a haul." Okay? In other words, he's saying, Peter, I know that you're really tired. I know that you're exhausted. I know you don't really want to do this, but I'm telling you, if you will just step out and do something, I'm going to show you something miraculous. And I think that the problem a lot of times with us is that we don't want to take that step out. A, because we're tired, but B, because we're kind of almost fearful that if we do take that step, it's not going to turn out right. And what Jesus wants to say to Peter is, Peter, if you just do what I ask you to do, you're going to see me at work. But you can't see me at work until you take that step and do something. Verse 5. And Simon Peter answered, "Master, we toiled all night exhaustingly and caught nothing in our nets, but on the ground of your word, I will lower the nets again." So with that one statement, we can learn so much about what Peter just did with Jesus. He said, on the ground of your word. And sometimes you and I are going to have to do things on the ground of his word, and we're not going to feel like it at all. Sometimes God asks us to do things like, forgive that person who hurt you. And you're like, well, I don't want to. I don't feel like doing that. Do it on the ground of my word, because then I can bless this relationship if you would just take that step and do it. Love your husband, even though you don't really like him. Take that step to do something to love him. And God says, then I can bless you. Be kind to the person who hurts you. That's really hard. I don't want to. They hurt me. Do it. Step out and do something. And this is what Peter's learning. What Jesus is trying to teach him is that nothing's going to change until you take the step to go and do something. Take your neighbor dinner. Okay, that may be a way that they'll hear the gospel. Don't have sex with the person you're not married to. Don't have that affair. Don't get drunk. See, these are all the things Jesus says in his word to do or don't do, and it's our choice to say yes or no. I put in there that he says, babysit your grandchildren, and I decided that Jesus did not say that. Okay, he did not say that to me, like, you must babysit your grandchildren. I'm like, you did not say that, Jesus. Which I'm going to babysit them, and I'll tell you about that in a minute. Anyway, so Peter didn't want to do what Jesus asked him because he was tired and exhausted, and we can come up with lots of excuses. They hurt me too bad. My husband's a jerk. I can't stand my next door neighbor. I mean, we can come up with a lot of excuses like Peter did, and yet he realizes that in order to do something, it's going to take a lot of work. And for you, forgiving that person might take a lot of work. For if you're here and you're like, well, I have a boyfriend and he's pressuring me to sleep with him, and or this guy, we're going to have an affair, and there's a lot of pressure that goes into that, and it's a lot of work to say no, I'm not going to do that. It's a lot of work to stand up your friends. If you're here and you're like, my friends want to go out and party on the weekends and get drunk, and they ask me to go, and it's like, it's a lot of work to say, I'll go. I'll have a glass of wine, or I'll have one beer. I'm not getting drunk because I can't do that anymore as a follower of Christ. It doesn't mesh with my beliefs any longer. But that's a lot of work. And we see that Peter has that choice too. I'm going to pick up these nets, haul them into my boat, row out there. That is a lot of work. And yet God is saying, if you do that, then I can show you the blessing of that. For some of you, it would be easier, and for Peter, it would be easier to say no thanks. For you, it would be easier maybe to go get a divorce. Maybe your husband you're just like, I just don't like him anymore. Don't love him, want to get a divorce. That's the easiest thing to do. And yet Jesus is saying, please don't do that. Please don't walk out on something when if you just do something, stay, love, be kind, do the things I'm asking you to do, even though it's difficult, I can make that boat filled with fish. I can make your marriage filled with love, but you got to do something to do that. Verse 6, and when they had done this, they caught a great number of fish, and as the nets were at the point of breaking, they signaled to their partners on the other boat to come and take hold with them. They came and filled both the boats, and so they began to sink. Now, to me, that says a lot. That says that God will do over and abundant what he wants to do in your life, but it's not going to happen if you and I don't step out and do something. He honors doing what he says. If you forgive that person, you're the one that's free. If you love your husband and are kind to him and do nice things for him, then God's saying, I can restore your marriage. I can give you that love for him. If you're kind to someone that hurts you, God can really mend that relationship. I mean, we've seen that over and over. People that we just never got along with and don't like, how God has just brought them back into our life, and we actually like each other. I mean, and that's only God can do that. And when you take someone dinner, like your neighbor, you're like, well, I don't like them, take them dinner, but what if they came to Christ because of that? I mean, those are the things that we have to think of. We've got to do the hard things and step out if we want God to bless us. We have to realize that most of the time we don't feel like it, but when we do, look at Peter's response in verse 8. He says, but when Simon Peter saw this, he fell down at Jesus' knees, saying, depart from me, for I am a sinful man, O Lord. For he was gripped with bewildering amazement, allied to terror, and all who were with him at the haul of the fish which they had made. Now, there's a couple points, and this was one of them that I thought of when I read this. That for all the time that Peter spent with Jesus, all the, hey, Jesus, come hang out with me. Hey, Jesus, I'm sitting here listening to you while you preach. All of those times, Peter never really got saved. He just was there. He was listening. He was a bystander. That was kind of cool. But the moment that Peter realizes who Jesus is, it changes his life forever. And I think that he realizes when he sees this boat full of fish, that it's like, oh my gosh, this isn't just some man that I'm putting my faith in. Like, we can go to church and say, oh yeah, sign me up for that Jesus thing. But until we really recognize who he is, that he's God and he's my Savior and he wants to come in and change my life, then we're never going to have that relationship that he wants. Now, the great thing that I noticed about Peter was that he doesn't do what a lot of people in America does. He doesn't, raise his hand and say, hey, Jesus, I want you to come in my life because I just need you to make me happy. And I just need you to answer all my prayers and be there for my bidding, and so I want you in my life for that. You don't see Peter saying, you know what? You are so lucky to have me, Jesus. Like, you are just fortunate that I'm on your team now. Like, none of that happens with Peter. He is amazed at God, and he's amazed at Jesus. And what does he do? He falls on his face, and he's like, oh my gosh, I really realize now who you are. And I think that is the first point of true salvation, of getting to the point of saying, God, you are holy and I am sinful, and there's a big gap between you and me, and I want to be close to you. And Jesus is saying, come to me. I am the only way to bridge that gap. And when we realize it, that's when our lives can begin to change. Now, I remembered that this is Jesus, the guy who stayed at Peter's house. I see that Peter saw him casting out demons and healing the sick, and Peter was in church service with Jesus. He watched him preach, so it would be like us being in all these places. But I think the thing that struck me with this was that none of those things changed Peter. None of them did. Like, he went to church, he did all that, and yet nothing changed in his life until he totally recognized who Jesus was, and then it changed his life forever. So I want to just throw this out too, that I think it was a reminder to me that a lot of people can go to church. You can show up at the doors and you cannot be saved. And I hate to be the bearer of that bad news, but I think it's true. You can see people get healed. You can show up at the doorstep and you can be like, I'm going to church. But until you have that moment where it's like, God, you're God, and I want you in my life, and then you start seeing your life change, then I would say that's true born again salvation when we come to that conclusion. And I think Peter finally, for the first time, understood what true salvation was. Now, what happens in Peter's life is suddenly he realizes that his whole purpose in his life has changed. His whole thing in life was, I'm a fisherman, I'm going to follow in my daddy's business, and that's just what I'm going to do. And now Jesus comes along and says, you know what? Your mission has just now changed. A couple weeks ago, Todd Clark at CCV did the whole thing on heaven, and he made the greatest point. He said, people are the only thing you can take to heaven with you. That's it. You can't take your stuff, your money, your kids, nothing. Heaven is only something that you can bring people to. So what Jesus is doing with Peter is saying, Peter, lose the family business. Okay, that may be good for a while, and that's fine, but I don't want you to fish for fish. I'm going to have you fish for people. Because fish are just there. They come, you eat them, they die, whatever. People, it's something that's for eternity. And so he's trying to get to Peter to say, Peter, I want you to use your job, your resources, everything that you have, and move your mission from it all about you to it's all about God. What can I do to serve for God's kingdom? Now, I want to just remind you that when a person comes to Christ, a lot of times you stay in the same position you always are. You're a nurse, you're a realtor, whatever, you're good to go. But what changes is not so much that position, but your job. It's like now you don't go to work for just a paycheck, which you do, you get that. But now there's a deeper meaning for why you show up to be the nurse or the doctor or the realtor or the lawyer. Now it's like, okay, I'm here to serve Jesus and tell as many people about him as possible. So now you're doing the same thing, but now you have an underlying deeper purpose in your life. So you're not doing it just so that you can get a paycheck, but you're doing it now so, like for Peter, so he can catch people instead of catching fish. I think what Jesus wanted to make Peter understand is, Peter, you can fish, and you can have a barbecue, and you can invite your friends over and have a beer, or whatever you guys do, and that's great. Now you can still do those same things, but now you've got an addition to there's a purpose behind that, because I want my neighbors to come to Christ. So you kind of see what he's doing there. Now, this is the second thing that I noticed from this passage, is that Jesus did not just say, hey, Pete, shut your eyes, abracadabra, poof, and there's all the fish. Like, it didn't happen that way. Jesus didn't just miraculously make fish where there were none. He said, Peter, I want you to go do something. And I think that's a great lesson to us to say, you know what? Sometimes God wants us to do something first so that he can do something. Lord, maybe you're sick. Lord, I need you to heal me. I really want to get better. Okay, maybe you need to go see that specialist. Maybe you need to go to the doctor. Maybe you need to do those things. God can heal, and he does. But I think for the most part, he always tells people to go and do something. Go wash yourself in the river. Go do this. Go do that. Lord, make my marriage better. Some people are literally sitting here going, I've been praying for 3 years for God to make my husband nicer and my marriage better. Okay, well, maybe it's going to take you doing something like go take a marriage class, go read some books, go get some marriage counseling, the two of you. I mean, sometimes you just got to go out and do something. Lord, I need to lose weight. Okay, I would love to pray that prayer and wake up a size 2. I mean, that would be like the coolest thing ever. Like, wow, that was a miracle. But unfortunately, I can't do that. So when I realized that, I went on Weight Watchers. I started walking the rec center. I lost 10 pounds. I have conveniently, in the last probably 3 weeks, gained 5 of it back. Now, I know what to do. Okay, I know that handful of peanut M&Ms that I grabbed out of the freezer last night right before I went to bed, probably not the best thing in the whole world to do. So I have to do something. I can't just eat all the M&Ms and say, dear Jesus, please make there be no calories in here, because that's just not how the world works. So if I want to lose weight, I'm going to have to do something. Jesus is not miraculously just going to do that. If you need a job, sitting at your house watching soap operas is not going to get you a job, okay? Go out, put out applications, look online, whatever it is you need to do. For Dusty, Lord, please just give me an A on my test, even though he didn't study, okay? Not going to happen. Dusty, you're going to get an A when you study. If you don't study, then you're going to get a D, and then you're going to be in deep trouble with me. That's what's going to happen. So the whole point is that God can restore your marriage, and he can give you the desire not to eat, and he can get you that job. But he, just like Peter, he's saying, Peter, go do something. I'm not going to miraculously do it. Get up, even when you don't want to. Haul your nets over, get it in there, and then I'm going to prove to you who I am. It's just a great lesson. I just love that. The other thing that I thought, too, about this was that I think sometimes it's very difficult to take that step. It's very difficult to say, I'm going to start Weight Watchers. I'm going to be nice to my husband. I'm going to actually say something nice to him today. Okay, there's steps that we have to take, but there's a lot of fear in that because taking risks is very fearful. This morning, I turned on Max Lucado. I told you I'm kind of on a Max Lucado kick right now. And on the Roku box, he's got his services on there. And he was telling a story. He's like, honestly, the master storyteller of the world. Like, I'm enthralled when he starts telling a story. But he was talking today about he went to a concert a couple nights ago, I guess it was, and there was a country western singer there. I don't even remember his name. And he said, I was listening to his story, and his story was that he grew up basically with this mom who was just a nightmare, had a older sister. The mom married the sister off at 14 to get rid of her. They lived in a car. She always had these guys with her, whatever. At 13 years old, they pulled up to a neighborhood and said, get out. He's on his own. And they pulled off. That was it. And here's a 13-year-old wandering around going, what am I going to do? Like I have nothing. So as the kid's walking through the neighborhood, and he sees a garage door open, and it is a man and a woman. They're working on some cabinets. And so the kid walked in and he said, hi, do you have any work for me? And the guy goes, sure, I'll let you mow my lawn for $20 a week. So the guy gets out, mows the lawn, comes back. In the meantime, he's just takes the $20 just to live. You know, he probably went to Taco Bell once a day. So he goes and does that. And then finally, a couple weeks later, the lady says, where do you live? And he said he lied because he didn't want them to fire him because this was his only job. And she didn't believe him. And she said, no, really, I really need to know where you live. And he said, I'm homeless. I don't have a mom or a dad. And they invited him to come live with him. And they gave him a room. And they took care of him the rest of his life. And he's now a country western singer. But I was thinking when I heard that, I thought, what kind of risk is that? What if the guy is crazy? What if he comes and murders us? We don't know anything about him. And there's always these what ifs, which is, I think, what Peter was going through. What if I throw my net out and Jesus doesn't come through? That's going to be embarrassing to me. I don't want to be embarrassed. And yet here, Jesus is saying, if you don't step out, you will never see the blessing that I can give you if you don't do that. In your handout, there's a story. I wrote it out for you. Gary Hagen, the founder of International Justice Mission, a Christian organization that frees people trapped in sex trafficking, describes God's calling to him. He says, I vividly remember when I finally had to make a decision to abandon my career at the U.S. Department of Justice to become the first employee of a not-for-profit organization that didn't actually exist called International Justice Mission. I had worked for 3 years with friends on the idea of IJM and was very excited in theory about this dream of following Jesus and the work of justice in the world. But then I actually had to act. I had to walk into this Department of Justice, turn in my badge. I tried to be very brave and very safe. That is to say, I walked in and asked my bosses for a year-long leave of absence, and my bosses politely declined. I was suddenly feeling very nervous. What was I really afraid of? As I thought about it, I feared humiliation. If my little justice ministry idea didn't work, no one was going to die. If IGM turned out to be a bad idea and collapsed, my kids weren't going to starve. We'd probably have to live with my parents for a while until I could find another job. But with my education, odds are I would soon find a job. The fact is, I would be terribly embarrassed. Having told everyone about my great idea, they would know that it was a bad idea or that I was a bad leader. Either way, it would be humiliating. So there I was, my boundary of fear I sensed God inviting me to an extraordinary adventure of service, but deep inside, I was afraid of looking like a fool and a loser. This was actually very helpful to see because it helped me get past it. When I am older, do I really want to look back and say, yeah, I sense that God was calling me to lead a movement to bring rescue to people who desperately need an advocate in the world, but I was afraid of getting embarrassed, and so I never even tried. Fear is normal, even among the earnest and devout, and it can be overcome, but first we must see the opportunity it provides, a revelation that only comes as we step to the precipice of action. And when I read that, I thought, I wonder if that's how Peter felt. Like, I'm really, really afraid to take this step out. And maybe for you, it's something like, I really want to adopt a baby. I really want to get into the foster care system and help someone out. But then there's all of these what ifs. Rob always jokes with me, like our 7th child is now 15. And he goes, man, the house is going to be quiet when all the kids are gone. Maybe we should adopt. Okay. I'm like, okay, no. I'd like, heck no. That's not even an option. But it's like, so you make wise decision. Like, that's not, if you're 100, don't adopt a baby. That's probably not brilliant. But for some of you, it's something like, I want to help somebody. I want to get involved with this ministry. I want to do something. But you're really fearful because you're thinking, what if it fails? And I think that's exactly where Peter was. This is going to sound so stupid. You know, I don't watch my grandchildren. I don't like to, and I realize the reason for it is because I don't like to feel responsible for someone else. I mean, it's like they come over to the house and I'm thinking, what if I turn my back and they get eaten by a coyote? Like, I mean, that's really like could happen. And even one of my sons said, Mom, Tinley was walking out in the yard yesterday. What if a coyote came and got her? I'm like, yeah, that's my point. That's what scares me. So anyway, but that's my fear. It's not that I don't love my grandchildren, but I don't want to be responsible in case something happens. Well, for Easter, the night before Easter or the day before Easter on Friday, I think I told you we're taking all the grandkids. I said all of them but the brand new baby that's like 2 weeks old. And I started thinking, why do I not want to take the baby? Fear. What if something happens, like I put her to bed and she never wakes up and it's my fault and it happens on my watch and I'm scared. And finally I just said, okay, I'll take the baby. Okay, now I've got 6 grandkids, okay, 9, 7, and a whole bunch of them under 4, okay? And we're going to watch them. I've engaged Cheyenne's help. I'm like, you're home, Dusty's home, babysitters, nannies, I don't know what's going to take. But I started thinking, my problem is that I'm fearful. I'm fearful that something outside of my control is going to happen. And as I was driving in this morning, I thought, that's exactly what we're talking about. I have to say, God, hands down, I need to watch my grandkids. They're going to be a blessing. I bought all these like really cool stuff to color. And so we'll have lots of fun. That I wouldn't know them or have that fun if I didn't take that step and do it. But I'm fearful to do it. So if anyone wants to come over and hang out at my house a week from Friday, come on over. We'll have a party. But I even thought about that with this ministry. It's like, I know I've told this to you before, but when we first started, my cousin actually was supposed to teach the class. And it was just a couple little girls, and we were just like, hey, let's do a Bible study. After the second one, she's like, I can't make it. You're going to have to teach. I'm like, I don't do this. What are you talking about? And so that's how this whole thing started, just from that. And then a couple weeks later, I had a lady that questioned something that I said, and it devastated me. And I went home, and I know I've told you this, I literally got under the covers. I went in, took the blanket, put it over my head, and I stayed under there, and I said, I'm never doing this again. Never. I am not going to be embarrassed like that. I am not going to be humiliated. I'm just, the more I don't do, the easier my life is going to be. And I stayed there for a while, and then it got kind of hot, which under the blankets do. And God just really spoke to my heart and said, why don't you get up and go find out the answers, okay? Instead of sitting here whining and being a little baby about it. And that was kind of the beginning. And when we moved from that place to the mall, and then we moved to Babos, and then we moved here, it was huge. Like, and then my husband's like, oh, we should put up a billboard. And I'm like, billboard, who does that? Like, people are going to think we're so stupid. Like, I can see my pastor going by, who do they think they are? I love my pastor. He would never say that. But other people, I've actually had calls from people going like, who are you? And where did you go to seminary? And why do you have, and that's scary and frightening because I want people to like me. But you know what? It doesn't always happen that way. That's just life, and we're going to be embarrassed, but I'd rather be embarrassed for Jesus than not for Jesus. So things take risks, and we have to step out if we want, just like Peter had to do for this. I was reminded of 2 Kings 5, 9 through 14, a man by the name of Naaman. He was the commander to the king of Syria. And so he's kind of a big deal. Like I was thinking like General Petraeus, okay, when he was in his prime of whatever. So people know him. He's kind of a big deal. And he has leprosy. And his little servant girl tells his wife, like, if you just have Naaman go to Elisha, the prophet in Israel, that he'll heal him. And so Naaman, gets all of his, chariots, and they're on their way to, because he wants to walk in and just have Elisha say, you're healed, and it all works out good. Look at verse 9. So Naaman came with his horses and chariots and stopped at Elisha's door. Elisha sent a message to him saying, go and wash in the Jordan 7 times, and your flesh shall be restored, and you shall be clean. See, it's the same principle we're saying, is that he didn't say, okay, yeah, you're healed. He said, go do something, go wash yourself. And Naaman was furious. Verse 11, but Naaman was angry and went away and said, behold, I thought he would surely come to me and stand and call on the name of the Lord his God and wave his hand over the place and heal the leper. And then he goes on about the rivers. Are not Abana and Parfor, the rivers of Damascus, better than all the waters of Israel? May I not wash in them and be clean? So he turned and went away in rage. Verse 13, and his servants came near and said, my father, if the prophet has bid you to do some great thing, would you not have done it? How much rather then, when he says to you, go wash and be clean? So he went down, dipped himself 7 times, and the man of God said his flesh was restored like that of a little child, and he was clean. So it's just a reminder that all through the Bible, it's the same thing. You and I want something, just praying for a miracle, it's great. And I do believe God does answer miracles in that particular way sometimes for a bigger purpose. But for the most part, he says, go do something, and I will bless what you do. Okay, now I was thinking that some people are here and you're waiting around for your miserable marriage to get better. Your life is miserable. You have, and so I just want to say that just like Peter, go do something biblical. Don't do something unbiblical, because that's the problem is people will be like, oh, this is God's sign that I should go get a divorce. No. If you have no biblical grounds for a divorce, okay, which is your husband walks out on you, your unbelieving husband walks out on you, or or he's committed adultery, you don't really have any biblical grounds. And so I would say you need to stay. Now, if of course you're being beat on, or then of course, you need to separate and get some help from that. But the bottom line is sometimes you have to stay, and that's what God is calling you to do, and make things better. Now, the other thing that I learned from this passage was Jesus used something familiar to Peter. He didn't say, hey, Pete, go join the sewing club or the gardening club, okay? He came to him with fish, and that's because that's what Peter knew was fish. And I thought it was so awesome of God that he has all of these really cool ways for people to come to know Jesus. And it may not be what you like or I like, but that's how diverse that God is. They have Cowboys for Christ. If you want to be a cowgirl or a cowboy and go to horse shows, get involved with that. They have Athletes in Action. The Demeters are involved in that. Fellowship of Christian Athletes, Jesus for Disability, Soldiers for Jesus, a motorcycle club. Get a load of this. Jabbing for Jesus, a boxing club, okay? Jesus and Dancers, Golfing for Jesus, Christian Gardening Club. So it's like God has given everyone all of these different areas and passions in your life that God's saying, look, take your passion and go do something with it for me. Now, I don't garden, or I don't dance or box or ride motorcycles, but a lot of people do, and there's other ways to come to Christ besides just what you and I do. Like there's other ways out there, and we need to support those groups instead of cut them down. So I love that Jesus used fishing to grab a hold of Peter's attention. I went to a women's Bible study one time, and the lady got up and was talking about how she grows her own garden. And she basically was like, you women need to grow your gardens, and you need to cook your fresh broccoli for your family. And then the next lady got up and she was like, I put on these dinners for our friends, and I'm so hospitable, and I decorate the tables with candles and china. And I'm thinking, okay, here's the deal. You come to my house, you're getting a paper plate, okay, a red Solo cup, and I cook in tins, okay? And if in fact, like, you get a placemat, it will be from probably a year ago when someone was there, and I'm going to shake it off in hopes that there's no food on it, okay? That's the way. So when I hear that, I'm feeling really like, I must be the worst Christian ever. Like, I'm the worst Christian mom because I clearly don't cook. I'm not hospitable. I never invite people over to my house. And so it's kind of like you can start feeling guilty about being something that you're not, or not being something that everyone thinks you should be. So my point is that Jesus came to Peter and talked about fishing. He came to the woman at the well and talked about water. Okay, Jesus knows what you like to do, and you need to take what your gift is and your talent and go with it. Get involved in the scrapbooking club so you can share Jesus with the people you scrapbook with, or do whatever it takes, because that's how big God is. He's kind of awesome that way. Okay, verse 10, where are we? Jeez. And also were James and John, the sons of Zebedee, who were partners with Simon Peter. And Jesus said to Simon, "Have no fear, from now on you will be catching men." And after they had run their boats on shore, they left everything and joined him as his disciples, and sided with his party and accompanied him. Now, the encounter here with Jesus at this particular time is what changed his life forever. Now, here's the next. There's just so many cool things out of this verse that I wanted to get to. What we see from Peter is that here's this encounter with Jesus with fish, okay? 4 years, I'm going to say approximately 4 years later, look at Peter in Acts 4. So we'll start in verse 1. As they were speaking to the people, the priest, the captain of the temple guard, and the Sadducees came up to them, being greatly disturbed because they were teaching the people and proclaiming in Jesus the resurrection from the dead. They laid hands on them and put them in jail until the next day, for it was already evening. So now here Peter is going to jail. On the next day, their rulers and elders and scribes were gathered together in Jerusalem, and Annas the high priest was there, and Caiaphas and John and Alexander, and all who were of high priestly descent. When they had placed them in the center, they began to inquire, "By what power or in what name have you done this?" And Peter, filled with the Holy Spirit, said to them, "Rulers and elders of the people." Now he's getting ready to preach. Okay, now stop for 1 second and think about this. This is Peter. Peter, the guy that we're talking about right now, the fishing Peter. It's just like, I'm just at my nets, I'm just doing whatever in Capernaum. And now suddenly, 4 years later, he's a preacher, okay? Because that is how great this encounter with Jesus was. He says in verse 9, "If we are on trial today for a benefit done to a sick man, as to how this man has been made well, let it be known to all of you and to all the people of Israel, that by the name of Jesus Christ the Nazarene, whom you crucified, by the way, whom God raised from the dead, by this name this man stands here before you in good health. He is the stone which was rejected by you, the builders which became the chief cornerstone." And here's his great thing that he wants everyone to know. "And there is salvation in no one else, for there is no other name under heaven that has been given among men by which we should be saved." Now, as they observed the confidence of Peter and John and understood that they were uneducated and untrained, they were amazed and began to recognize them as having been with Jesus. Okay, so that's the whole point that we're trying to get to today is here's a fisherman, untrained, unschooled, no idea who Jesus is. Jesus comes on the scene, comes in Peter's life, and radically changes everything about him. Now he's not fishing for fish, now he's fishing for people. Not only that, by doing that, he's standing up and sharing his faith to a lot of people and getting thrown in jail for it. Okay, so that's what we're trying to say. He's got this complete boldness. So, as I was thinking about this week, I thought we need to ask ourselves. So I'm going to ask you because I asked myself this. How long have you been a Christian? Like, have you been a Christian for 1 year, 5 years, 10, 20, 30, you name it? When did you have that moment where you're just like, okay, Jesus, my life is yours? It could have been yesterday. It could be like 5 minutes ago. Okay, whatever that looks like, now we need to ask the second question, which is, how am I growing? Am I stagnant? Am I still back in Capernaum watching the fish every day? Or have I moved on to doing something for him? See, because that's what happens. We don't just come to Christ and then nothing ever happens. We come to him, we grow in our faith, we share him. That's the progression. We see it all through the Bible. And so I want us to just look at ourselves and say, what is going on in my life? Is that happening? And if not, why not? We need to really ask that question and say, God, what is wrong with me? Why is my faith not growing? And come to the conclusion of what that is so you can get that dealt with. I realize that Peter's faith story starts just like yours and mine. we hear about Jesus, just like Peter did. We check out his claims. We show up at church. We figure out what he's all about. Then God opens our eyes, and suddenly we see Jesus for who he is, which is what happened with Peter. And then we realize he comes in our life. He washes us clean. Sins are gone. All the wrong that I ever did in my life is gone. Clean slate, ready to start fresh, brand new. And because of all of those things, now my life is his. Now it's like, Jesus, what do you want me to do with my life? It's all about you now. So that's the progression that we see in a true Christian change. And the greatest part is that Peter was totally unschooled. You may be here and say, I can't share my faith. I don't know anything, okay? I just got saved yesterday, okay? Well, if you know enough to get saved, you know enough to just tell someone, look, I don't know that much. I just know Jesus came in my life. I'm free. I'm going to heaven. Can I hand you a book? Okay, it's really just that simple to do. But we have to realize that Peter was like us. He was very unchanged until Jesus came in his life. Now, fast forward to you and me, that the same thing happens to us, and so we need to remember that whatever our places in our life, that God wants to use us in that particular place. You could be an art teacher, singer, cook, dog groomer, yoga teacher. I don't care what you are. Wherever the things are that you like, that's where God wants to use you. So it's kind of cool. Okay, now I want to talk about passion for a second, real quick. I wonder what time it is. I feel like all I'm doing is talking today. Oh, we have 8 minutes. Okay, let's talk about passion. Because the thing is that with passion is that God gives each one of us a passion for something, okay? And so what I'm saying is I want you and we need to go out and get involved with something we're passionate about. Now, if you're not passionate about anything, then you need to get on your knees and say, God, please give me a passion for something. Bill Hybels wrote in his book called The Holy Discontent. It's on page 5 in your handout. He said, still today, what wrecks the heart of someone who loves God is often the very thing God wants to use to fire them up to do something that, under normal circumstances, they would never attempt to do. Whether you're a high-powered marketplace person, a stay-at-home mom, full-time student, or something altogether different, you, yes you, can join God in making what is wrong in the world right. And it all starts with finding your holy discontent, and it begins with you determining what it is that you just can't stand, okay? It's really important to find out what is it in your life that you can't stand. For us, our holy discontent became when we started teaching. And we started doing this whole ministry because we kept seeing this disconnect between people's faith. Like, hi, I go to church, but nothing changes in my life. I don't read my Bible. I don't pray. I go to church. And so we saw this disconnect, and it drove us nuts to the point where we wrote our first little book, and then we wrote the second one, and then we started teaching. And it's because our whole goal in our life until the day I die is going to be look, I want people to really know Jesus. And I want them to be able to say, the bad stuff that's happening in my life or the good stuff, whatever it is, has to be connected to God somehow, and how that all connects. And that's how we have joy and peace and contentment with everything that goes on in our life. But that became our holy discontent, and that's how this ministry was born. But for you, it could be something like homelessness. We have a friend of ours that we met when we were dealing with homeless stuff. She came from a very wealthy family, and she walked away from everything, all the wealth, all the family, because her heart was, I just want to help homeless people downtown. And she's done that, and to this day. Maybe sex trafficking for young girls in Cambodia. No food for children in Phoenix. I loved what CCV did when they did their whole thing, people are starving, children are starving in Phoenix. We don't need to go to Africa for that. It's great to do that, but there's ways to get involved with what really bothers you about life. Prison ministries, diapers. There's one lady that she always has our Halloween thing, and she's like, I want everyone to bring diapers for single moms. Okay, it's a strong passion of hers. Water bottles for homeless, abused women. You guys figure out what your deal is. This whole thing with Pastor Saeed threw me on Jay Sekulow, his website. And this is what, I Googled him, and this is what it says. He is a passionate advocate for protecting religious and constitutional freedom. Here you got a man who's a lawyer, but he's passionate about something to do with God. And that's what I want us to see, is that's what we need, is a passion for something. And if you don't have one, ask God to give you one. So I look at, it just dawned on me, now it's the guy, pastor, his wife does HIV or AIDS. Rick Warren, there you go. His wife was reading an article one day and saw all these pictures of kids with AIDS in Africa, and it freaked her out, and suddenly that became her holy discontent. She's like, I can't do this. She got totally involved with children with AIDS in Africa because she got really discontented about something. It could be anything. I was laughing because Therese's husband, John Demeter, they're involved with Athletes in Action, and so they went to my husband's Bible study a couple weeks ago. It was the day it was raining in here. And not in here, but here. and so one of the kids that was helping, it was kind of funny. He was like so cute, okay? And they all look like they're 10 to me, but of course he probably was 20. So he walks by and I told one of the kids, I go, okay, that guy needs to marry Cheyenne, my daughter. So could you just kind of set this whole thing up? And they're like, Mom, he's like, engaged. I'm like, okay, well, that's okay. My daughter's really awesome. We can work this out. But anyway, come to find out later that he plays for the Cleveland Browns. Okay, so I'm trying to set my daughter up with a football player. Anyway, the point is that he has taken his football career and said, I love football, but I love Jesus. And so I'm going to mix the two and use my career to do something for him. So God didn't say, don't be a football player. You need to go get a job in ministry. No, please go be a football player. Stand up in front of people and tell them about Jesus. That's what you do. So you take your passion and you move on with that. Some people have just gifts of making money. Like you have a business and you're like, all I want to do is make money. Okay, that's not a bad thing. It's a bad thing if you just go spend it on yourself. But I look at the people who support this ministry. We would not have a billboard. We would not be on Roku. We would not be doing this here if people didn't donate. I mean, that's just the way it is. People hard-earned money and they spend it and they donate online, or they put it in the donation box, or they write whatever. We wouldn't have that because there's people out there that say, you know what, I don't really want to teach and I'm not a football player, but I can make money. And with this money, I want to find something I have a passion about, throw my money into it so that the gospel can get spread all over the world. So there's a lot of, we just got to find out what our discontent is. Now, I want to end today. I wonder what time it is. Oh my gosh. Okay, we have 2 minutes. I'm going to go all the way to the end, and I want to read a story about the Navy SEALs. But before I say this, I want to say one final thing, that in the end, when you and I die and we take our last breath, the only thing that will ever matter is what we did for him. That's it. Like, it's not going to matter what I did for myself or what vacations I went on, or what, and as great as that is and all, that's good. But the only thing that's going to matter for eternity and what happens and who I've brought along, that's what is going to matter. And so our lives need to be measured by, what is our holy discontent? What is my passion? What is it that I can promote Jesus in my realm that I'm in? Because our lives shouldn't be measured by our money or the things that we have. It should be measured on how many people are going to spend eternity in heaven because of what I have done, what God has given me to do. And I have, just like Peter, stepped out, grabbed my net, walked into the boat and said, here I am, Lord, now do something with me. I'm here. I'm giving you myself. I'm doing what you say. Now the rest is up to you. The very page 6 of your handout, the elite team of Navy SEALs that killed Osama bin Laden on May 1st is still largely shrouded in mystery, but a recent article in the Wall Street Journal, a former Navy SEALs, divulged the one quality that makes for a successful SEAL, the ability to think about other people and a higher purpose. So here's an excerpt. The rigors the SEALs go through begin on the day they walk into basic underwater demolition SEAL training in Coronado, California, universally recognized as the hardest military training in the world. BUDS last a grueling 6 months. The classes include large contingents of high school and college track and football stars, national champion swimmers, and top-ranked wrestlers and boxers, but only 10 to 20% of the men who begin BUDS usually manage to finish. What kind of man makes it through Hell Week? That's hard to say, but I do know generally who won't make it. Those are the dozen types that fail. The weightlifting meatheads who think that the size of their biceps is an indication of their strength. The preening leaders who don't want to get dirty, and they'll look at me, former athletes who've always been told they're stars. In short, those who fail are the ones who focus on a show. Some men who seemed impossibly weak at the beginning of SEAL training, men who puked on runs and had trouble with pull-ups, made it. Some men who were skinny and short and whose teeth chattered just looking at the ocean also made it. Some men who were visibly afraid, sometimes to the point of shaking, made it too. Almost all the men who survived possessed one common quality. Even in great pain, faced with the test of their own lives, and they had the ability to step outside of their own pain, put aside their own fear, and ask, how can I help the guy next to me? They had more than the fist of courage and the physical strength. They had a heart large enough to think about others and to dedicate themselves to a higher purpose. And I think that's exactly what Jesus is trying to tell Peter to do. Peter, I want you to step outside and say, look, it's about a higher purpose. It's about people coming to know me. It's not about you just staying in Capernaum, being a fisherman. He's saying, I want you to put out your net so I can show you what to do. And that's what he did. And that's the coolest thing ever. Because an encounter with Jesus is life-changing and life-altering. And I never want us to forget about that. I want to say this real quick, and then we'll leave. A lot of people, for you, it might mean just stepping out and doing something. A lot of people, it might mean staying where you are. Because some people are like, well, I hate my job. I want to get a new one. But maybe, just maybe, the person in the next cubicle is starting to warm up to you. And now you know you can talk to them at lunch and maybe talk about Jesus. Don't run from that. Maybe you're a stay-at-home mom and you know you got to get a job because you can't really afford it and your husband doesn't make enough money. But maybe staying at home is the best thing to do. And maybe you just got to go on a budget and teach your kids how to trust God and move into a smaller place. I mean, sometimes it doesn't always mean making a change. Sometimes it means staying. And I say that with marriages too. Sometimes it means staying. You're going, my husband's not a Christian, he's a jerk. Okay, stay. Sometimes God really calls people to stay and make that work and be the light to them. Because God, just like he said, he has filled this boat with lots and lots of fish. He can do anything in the whole world. He can do anything. And so my question as I want to walk out today is, how has your encounter with Jesus changed your life and those around you?